Hello and welcome to On Books. This week, I am excited to bring you the book Deep Work. Deep Work, and the subtitle is Deep Work, Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. Okay, this is a book by Cal Newport. He's also the author of another book, which we've talked about on this podcast. The other book's called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And Deep Work, honestly, I think the title says it all about what this book's about. It's about finding focus in your life to get real shit done is basically what it is, and to avoid distractions. I am going to start this episode by reading to you some of the highlights, bringing you some of the highlights and takeaways from the book so that you can, either feel like you know a sense of what it's about, or if you've read it before, maybe reminding you, hey, yeah, this is what it was about, or this is what, these are some takeaways. And then after that, I'm going to share with you personally just some of my story about how I came to find this book and have tried applying some of these things to my life. So you can stick around if you want to read that. But let's just get started. So it's a fairly big yellow book, but it's about 250 pages. All right, medium-sized book, yellow book. And I'm going to read from... Well, on the back, we have a lot of famous people who Cal Newport clearly knows that gave him great quotes. So I could tell it's pretty good so far already. We got Seth Godin on the back, Derek Sivers. We got Daniel Pink, who wrote Drive, Adam Grant, bunch of good people up here, which gives you a sense of the kind of book that it is. It's, I don't know, people don't use the term self-improvement books anymore, which is probably good because it sounds like... I don't know. It sounds like 1980s, like infomercial life going on. But, it's definitely a way to optimize your time and your focus in life. And that's what we got going on here. So with Deep Work, reading from the insert, you could hear it here. Deep work is the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task. It's a skill that allows you to quickly master complicated information and produce better results in less time. Aha. Okay. So yeah, self-helpy. No, I'm just kidding. No, I love it. It's a good book. Obviously, it's a good book because I'm bringing it to you. He goes on, this is still on the cover. He says, deep work will make you better at what you do and provide the sense of true fulfillment that comes with craftsmanship. I'm thinking of Sears right now. Sears craftsmanship. But it's like craftsmanship for your mind and your time. I loved, as soon as this was recommended to me, I loved the title alone. A friend said, hey, have you read Deep Work? And I just instantly having a name, and I was like, yes, like I should read that, because I knew that whatever the hell I was doing was not necessarily deep work, but I didn't know what deep work was. So I picked it up like I'm doing right now for you and just started reading it. And I'm going to start reading to you now from page 1. And honestly, this is the kind of book for me. Don't tell Cal, but I feel like you read the first 30 pages. I feel like you kind of get the gist of it up front. And if you're, if this is enough for you, you're listening and you're like, cool, Chris, I got it. Like I got it. Maybe you can make some real changes. But you might want to continue reading the whole thing for yourself or reading the whole book, because there's a lot of inspiration in here and stories and takeaways. And so I'm going to bring you some of those now, starting where we usually start. Page 1, the introduction. Here we go. Ready? This is Deep Work by Cal Newport. In the Swiss canton of St. Gallen, near the northern banks of Lake Zurich, is a village named Bollingen. I would probably just say somewhere in Switzerland. So somewhere in Switzerland in 1922, I'll keep reading, the psychiatrist Carl Jung, I think 1922 is the giveaway here, 1922 Switzerland. The psychiatrist, Carl Jung chose this spot to begin building a retreat. I wonder why. He began with a basic 2-story stone house he called the Tower, capital T. After returning from a trip to India, capital I, as usual, where he observed the practice of adding meditation rooms to homes, he expanded the complex to include a private office, a room of his own. In my retiring room, I am by myself, Jung said of the space. I keep the key with me all the time. No one else is allowed in there, except with my permission. It's like a secret little room he has, with his own little entrance and key. Nifty. Sounds like what I used to do when I was a teenager. I had locked away little rooms. my basement room. Anyways, in the book Daily Rituals, journalist Mason Curry sorted through various sources on Jung to recreate the psychiatrist's work habits at the tower. Jung would rise at 7 a.m., Curry reports, and after a big breakfast, he would spend 2 hours of undistracted writing time. I underline that, undistracted writing time in his private office. His afternoons would often consist of a meditation or long walks in the surrounding countryside. There was no electricity at the tower, so as day gave way to night, light came from oil lamps and heat from fireplace. Jung would retire to bed by 10 p.m. Quote here, "The feeling of repose and renewal that I had in the tower was intense from the start," he said. Though it's tempting to think of Bollingen Tower as a vacation home, if we put it into the context of Jung's career at this point, it's clear that the lakeside retreat was not built as an escape from work. In 1922, when Jung bought the property, he could not afford to take a vacation. Only 1 year earlier, so in 1921, he had published Psychological Types, a seminal book that solidified many differences that had been long developing between Jung's thinking and the ideas of his one-time friend and mentor, Sigmund Freud. So, if you don't know what's going on here, Freud and Jung spelt Jung, if you've never seen it spelt. These were the big thinkers in psychoanalytics, and this is like the story of their upbringing, and clearly of Jung taking deep. Well, I think what we're getting here is to a place of where he did his deep work. Let's continue. Okay, so to disagree with Freud in the 1920s was a bold move. Don't you do that. To back up his book, Jung needed to stay sharp and produce a stream of smart articles and books further supporting and establishing analytical psychology, the eventual name for his new school of thought. There you go. He's doing it. It's a lot of writing. Jung's lectures and counseling practice kept him busy in Zurich. This is clear. But he wasn't satisfied with busyness alone, nor am I. It's me saying that. He wanted to change the way we understood unconscious. I underline that too. He wanted to change the way we understood the unconscious, because that's cool. And this goal required deeper, more careful thought than he could manage amid his hectic city lifestyle. Jung retreated to Bollingen, not to escape his professional life, but instead to advance it. Ooh, okay. Carl Jung went on to become one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. I think that goes without saying. There are, of course, many reasons for his eventual success. In this book, however, I'm interested in his commitment to the following skill, which almost certainly played a key role in his accomplishments. And now onto the next page, we have this indented definition of deep work. Are you ready for it? So this is what the whole book is about. This page right here, page 3. Ready? Deep work in bold. Here we go. Deep work. Professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. These efforts create, I'm laughing because when the hell was the last time you had distraction-free concentration? That's funny. These efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate. Okay, so this is clearly a time before cell phones or Facebook or Twitter or people tapping you on the shoulder in open offices. But that's what deep work is. And it's a great definition. It's just great to have that idea that this is a thing that could exist in your life if you will it, if you want it, right? Okay, so deep work. Let's talk a little bit more about this distraction-free idea that Mr. Cal Newport's showing us. So he says, deep work is necessary to writing every last drop of value out of your current intellectual capacity. I'm reading like he's an old man, but he's 35. I think he's a few years younger than I am. We know now from decades of research in both psychology and neuroscience that the state of mental strain that accompanies deep work is also necessary to improve your abilities. Deep work, in other words, was exactly the type of effort needed to stand out in a cognitively demanding field like academic psychiatry in the early 20th century. All All right, he goes on the next page to talk about other people who benefit from deep work. I should mention that deep work is a term that I'll just say Cal Newport came up with, but it's his own word. It's an idea that he's coming up with in this book. It's not necessarily a psychological academic term specifically, but he's introducing it. So he surmises that this is also, looking at the style of people like Woody Allen. He has here, he's more or less like. He's like, this guy wrote 44 films, wrote and directed 44 films, 23 Academy Awards. He's a badass. Whether you like him or not, whatever, it's undeniable that Woody Allen has done an immense amount of work. The guy is super prolific. So, whenever somebody's so prolific, even if they're like not good at it, I tend to be jealous. And, like not every Woody Allen movie is great. Not every James Franco thing he's done is great, but I totally respect the guy more than anybody, just for loving the art form of making things that weren't there, and he's, and this is what Cal Newport's giving. He's giving these examples of a bunch of people. J.K. Rowling does not own a computer. He goes through this story. Woody Allen does a deep work. He doesn't allow electronic distractions. Microsoft CEO Bill Gates famously conducted Think Weeks twice a year, during which he would isolate himself to do nothing but read and think big thoughts. That's great. It was during a 1995 Think Week that Gates wrote his famous Internet tidal wave memo that turned Microsoft's attention to an upstart company called Netscape. And in an ironic twist, Neil Stephenson, he's the cyberpunk kind of science author, who helped form our popular conception of the internet age, is near impossible to reach electronically. He offers no website or email address, yada, yada, yada. So the next few pages go over people who Cal's putting together and saying, these people are amazing and prolific because they have a low technology diet and they know how to focus their time. Moving on to about 2 pages forward. I like this page. So I'm on page 6 right now, because now we get the definition for the opposite of deep work. This one might sound a little more familiar to me, to some people, right? This is the thing I try to fight against. What would you call the opposite of deep work? Shallow work, right? So here we have shallow work. Shallow work. Ready for the definition? Here we go. Shallow work. Non-cognitively demanding, logistically styled tasks often performed while distracted. I think the idea there is you're doing things while you're distracted. These efforts tend to not create much new value in the world and are easy to replicate. Okay. So, in an age of, I'm going to keep reading, in an age of network tools, in other words, knowledge workers is this term that is used often for people who have jobs that they use their mind for. I mean, I guess anybody doing computational tasks in their head or doing design work or that kind of thing, versus, I don't know what you would call it, people that work with their hands, would be the opposite. Like if you're doing, I don't know, if you're like a CrossFit instructor or a plumber or these kind of things, I think that would be the opposite. But knowledge workers, people that you focus, you're a writer, this kind of thing, knowledge workers. So he's saying, in other words, knowledge workers increasingly replace deep work with the shallow alternative, constantly sending and receiving email messages like human network routers. That's funny. With frequent breaks for quick hits of distraction. Oh, you know what that is. Instagram, number one. Instagram is number one. And when I'm in the subway and I look over someone's shoulder, Instagram is number one in the New York City subways. Everybody's on that. We take a quick break of you're on it right now, probably are on Instagram. Somebody is. Okay. Large efforts that would be well served by deep thinking, such as forming a new business strategy or writing an important grant application, get fragmented. Ooh, good word. I should underline that right now. Get fragmented. This is the idea of taking something whole and fragmenting it like time into distracted dashes. Ooh, that produce muted quality. That's some good writing right there. Well done, Cal Newport. To make matters worse, I hate when authors do. I love when authors do that, but it's like, it can get worse like that. I'm like, oh man, you're taking me somewhere dark. to make matters worse, for depth, there's increasing evidence, now we're bringing evidence into this, that the shift towards the shallow is not a choice that can be easily reversed. And this is where Cal Newport is kind of, foreshadowing what's going to come later, where he talks about building concentration as a skill, as a muscle that you have in your body, which I believe is true. If you've done meditation or heard about meditation, I think the ability to calm your mind, the ability to focus, the ability to shut off the running kind of babble. I think Eckhart Tolle calls it like thinking is a disease, he says, and it's true in a way. I mean, man, it is hard to just sit down and not think, right? Your mind is just always chattering, this kind of loop of ideas. Did I shut the oven off? Did I do this? Should I call her? Should I, all this kind of stuff. So this is kind of what he's hinting at that he's going to talk about in depth later, is how to train that muscle of your mind into doing deep work, and how over time, it takes time to get away from shallow work and to build that strength. Moving onward, we're on page 14 now, I'm skipping ahead. The deep work hypothesis. This is in bold. I'm going to read this to you. This is his hypothesis. So the deep work hypothesis is the ability to perform deep work. He says, the ability to perform deep work is becoming increasingly rare at exactly the same time it is becoming increasingly valuable in our economy. As a consequence, the few cultivate skill and then make it the core of their working life will thrive. So in this book, he has two goals, more or less. He says this book has two goals. The first is to convince you that the deep work hypothesis is true, which between you and me, like, all right, cool, I'm convinced, like more or less. I think that makes sense. What I'm saying think makes sense is I think that most people are doing shallow work in their day. If you work at I don't want to say just because you work at a big company, but I see a lot of people work at big companies. You're 9 to 5. You spend a lot of time. A lot of people waste a lot of time. I don't know that I need to academically prove that with citations. You and I can agree, right? A lot of people are just waiting for the clock to tick down, right? I don't find that as much because I run my own company, and I've been doing that for, oh my God, like 12 years now, So because of that, when you're on your own time, to me, it's the inverse, where I find that time is really, time is really important, and so it's the opposite. I'm never just trying to let the clock run down. If anything, I'm just always trying to find time and use it as most valuably as I can. But he has a good point, if you need to be convinced that this deep work hypothesis, that there's this idea that you could be doing more deep work, and that by doing that, you can cultivate this skill that will give you better job skills and help you thrive, then read the first half of the book. There's a lot of good examples in there. It's pretty solid. The second part of this book is to teach you how to take advantage by training your brain and transforming your work habits. So if you want, you could just go to that part of the book. And let's do that right now. Let's go to that part of the book. Okay, so the second half of the book is tips, like I said, tips for how to apply deep work to your life. Honestly, I feel like this is a good beach read, the second half of the book, because there's some good stories in here and some good takeaways. Although I feel like it could have been a blog post of like top 10 ways to do deep work or something like that, or like a video summary, something like that. But there is some good. It's good, well written, and it's interesting, but a little long at about like a 75 pages or 100 pages at the end here. So, but let's get into a few of those. I'm going to bring you them now, so that if you don't want, you don't have to read it. Two of the main takeaways here. The first one is embrace boredom, and the second one is quit social media. I think those are two themes here. So embracing boredom. Whew, what does that mean to embrace boredom? Well, one example that I like that he gives is, we tend to think, okay, I got to do work now, so I'm going to put aside my phone. I'm going to get off the internet. Maybe on a good day. On a bad day, I would say I leave open a tab browser, or it's like minimized, and it's kind of always there reminding you. The worst is if you're getting alerts. You know what? I guess we have to be honest with ourselves. Like, we're all in different realities right now, right? I mean, I don't have alerts going on, but I've been at some people's computers, and this might be you, and like every time someone sends a Gmail email, you might get an alert. Ooh, that is distracting. That is the opposite of doing deep work. But even if you don't have the alerts, like I don't have the alerts, but I know it exists. Like I know that I could go to Gmail. And so, that is tricky as well, because I find the temptation to go to it or to go to whatever one of my looped sites I want to browser loop through. So his tip here of, embracing boredom is, hey, instead of saying, hey, Chris, I'm going to put, 30 minutes, an hour aside to do work, he said, schedule in the times that you can be free to check. So do the opposite, right? Maybe you say, okay, at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., I'm going to allow for 10 minutes to go through all my emails. Even if email is an integral part of your job, I think it's reasonable to say, I'm just going to answer them all at once. Now, another component of that you may be like, well, my boss might email me or my mom might email me or something. I think another part of that is training people. You have to think about, what are the expectations? If you always write back right away, well, then somebody might do just your worst nightmare might be true. They might say, hey, I emailed you and you didn't write back, and it's only 20 minutes have gone by. So how do you deal with that? Well, you may need to rate these people, who depend on you a lot in this kind of way for a quick response, and say, hey, I'm trying this thing called deep work and I'm trying to embrace the boredom, right? You don't need to say that, but that's the intent. So I'm just going to check my email twice a day. I have lots of friends that do this thing. I have a few friends that just check it twice a week, and I just know that about them. So if I write them, okay. If I don't get an email in 2 days, I'm not freaking out. Also, it's good because it trains me. I know, if I'm going to email my buddy John, that I know that I have to write him ahead of time. So it's also, I guess it weans off the type of people in your life who may send you these last minute emails. Hey, last minute, I need this done. They might start to think, oh, okay, I have to get this in sooner to Chris because he doesn't check his email every single second of the day. Again, I am empathetic to the fact that this might not work for everyone, but it's definitely something worth considering. I'm sure there's at least one person in your life that you can apply this to right away. So embracing the boredom, scheduling time to be alone with your work and just being uncomfortable with it, and then scheduling the time to check things and train people so that you don't have to always be on call. You know what I mean? So that's the first thing. And then the second one that I gave you here, which is quit social media. Oh man, that's a whole thing, right? Social media. I'm going to share with you a story here about how I've been struggling to apply this to my life, and then some tips that I found have worked for me. So I'm taking from the book here, but also, my own life of applying this to my life. I went to Berlin. I always go to Berlin. I love Berlin, Germany. And I went in last September, because I really wanted to find time to work on a new course. I had created this Bitcoin course and to write. Really, really, really wanted to write. I had some essays that I was working on. So just like Jung, in the beginning of this book here, Carl Jung, just like Carl Jung, that sounds a little pretentious, but as I learned from the book, right, it's important to have not necessarily a vacation, but I don't know the word, a work vacation. Like I was gonna do work, but to be here in New York is distracting. There's lots of events and people and family, and there's just the constant noise of life, and it's not a bad thing, but it is, when you're trying to do deep work, it's a distraction. It can be a distraction. So the thought was, okay, I'm going to go to Berlin and find time, in my tower, so to speak. And there was definitely a lot of positive things, and embracing the boredom is tough. And the hardest part is I wasn't alone because I brought my phone. I got a rhyme. I wasn't alone because I brought my phone, and And man, that thing is the opposite of deep work, right? And so I remember this has been about 3 out of 4 weeks into my trip, and I was doing okay, but there was like this one essay that I just couldn't find time. So I said, you know what, this last week, I'm just going to be heads down and work on this thing. I'm going to embrace the boredom. I'm going to shut off social media, all this stuff. And 2 days into it, it was still not happening. I was just not getting it done. I don't know what the hell I was doing those days. It was just not happening. And then the absolute best thing happened. I got robbed. This is true. So I didn't get robbed on purpose, but I was walking through one of the shadiest areas in Berlin. Berlin is so safe, honestly. I think it's such a safe city, except for one part. And if you've ever been there, you know it's near Görlitzer Park. It's super shady. And it's especially shady when you walk near that park at night, like 1 a.m. in the morning. And it's especially shady when you're wearing a costume like I was, because I'm an American and I was going to a costume party at 1 a.m. I was going to a party because that's Berlin. And so just like an idiot, I was with a friend and had my phone in my pocket sticking out, and they must have seen it. They must have seen me having this phone in my pocket, but I didn't know it. Actually, I didn't know what was going on, but one of the guys tried to fight me. He more or less just was yelling at me in German and pushing, and I didn't know what was up. And then his buddy comes from behind me and grabs me, and he took my phone and then ran, and then they both ran, and that was it. So that's the story. I was fine. Everything's good. I was fine. But I'm an idiot because I didn't even realize they had taken my phone until like an hour later. Maybe I'd realized it. It'd taken a while. Not an hour later. That's a lie. I definitely checked it within an hour, but I think I'd walked to the place that we were going to. So maybe about like half an hour, on our way. And anyway, point of the story is, I was in the situation abroad without a phone. And it was that week from there on for the rest of the trip that I actually got shit done. You know, it was like, I literally needed to be robbed. If that night, I was thinking that night I could have taken my phone and thrown it in the river, it would have been the same output. I would have had no phone. But it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to have the agency to shut it away, right? So the end of the story ends with me getting a new phone. About 3 weeks after that, I tried to go as long as I could without one. I needed my 2-factor authentication. That's what I tell myself. And then I got a new phone. And since having my new phone, I've been trying to adapt a few tricks to my life, which have been trying to recreate that moment of, let's say, boredom, right? Where I had to be bored because I had no other option. And things that I've done are removing a lot of apps is really helpful. Putting it on airplane mode and putting it in the drawer at night or when I'm home. If it's in front of me, I tend to touch it. But if I put it away, I like put it in the drawer and put it away. It's out of my reach. That's really helpful. I think the main takeaway here is that you want to give yourself a situation where you don't have the option to touch the phone, right? So like when I didn't have a phone, I could go out at night and I didn't have that urge to like check. So I just didn't have a phone to check. So when there's no option, your brain isn't cycling between, should I check it? Did someone text me? That voice amazingly shut off, which is amazing. But as soon as you have it, that voice comes back. And so if you put it away at night, or you give it to somebody, or you make an agreement with your spouse or, husband or something, whatever it is, like if you can make it so that there's no option for you to check it, I don't know, however you have to do that, throw it in a river or go walk over a bridge in Berlin at 1 a.m. dressed like a sailor, whatever, then whatever it takes, get that taken care of, to not have the option. Because your brain is literally using glucose to make these making choices is expensive, and for your brain energy and for your time. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. My friend Alexis told me if you put your phone in black and white mode, which you can, it's in black and white, it makes it way less appealing to use, which is true. So that's something, although I like looking at photos, so that didn't last too long. And for Facebook, there is something I use called the Newsfeed Eradicator, which has stopped me from, if you delete Facebook off your phone and on the website you use the Newsfeed Eradicator, basically when you go to facebook.com, you don't see your wall, which is super helpful. So these are all a few of my tips based on losing my phone or having my phone stolen that I've been incorporating into my life to try to find deep work. For me, deep work is 3 hours of uninterrupted work. And if I can do 2 of those cycles in a day, that is a good day. If I can do 3 hours straight without checking my email or going on social media and then taking that break, that is a really good day. I'm not going to promise that I do that every day, but that's more or less what I shoot for. And and then I don't necessarily need to work a whole 8-hour day. If I work 2 concentrated 6 hours, and then leave some time for email in between there, to me, that's like a full day. And that feels pretty good. All right. Thanks for listening to another episode of On Books. You can subscribe to On Books on iTunes or Spotify. It is free. I do this because I love books and I know that I read more books than most people. So you might not have enough time. I'm reading the books that I think are life-changing and impactful and bringing you the best from them, or hoping to give you some guidance on what you might want to read or what is worth your time. So hopefully you enjoyed this. You can go to the website on-books.com, where I have some notes, YouTube videos, all that kind of stuff on here. If you like hanging out with me, I got classes online where you can hang out more. It sounds like I'm flirting with you, but actually I am. So hi. Do you want to hang out more? I have classes online that you can take with me. Yep. Where do you get those classes, Chris? You get those at onemonth.com. That's onemonth.com, where you can take classes with me to learn how to do things such as code in 30 days. I have an HTML course, or learn how to understand and buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, cryptocurrencies, WordPress. I have a bunch of different courses online that I teach, and you can check those out. What else? I don't know. There's a ton of different things. If you have any questions or feedback for me, you can always reach me. I'm chris@onemonth.com, which is something that's in this book that Cal Newport says not to do explicitly. Don't give out your email and be accessible, because it's a waste of time from doing deep work. I don't know. I have a hard time with that. I really want to be accessible. I feel like this is a dialogue in some ways, and this is about you as much as it is about me. It's about, hopefully giving you something. And I think to put it out there without being receptive isn't doing my full job. So, and so I'm always interested to hear, as well as negative things too. If you're like, hey, you should do this better, blah, 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 I'll listen to it too. I'm open to that. Okay, fun. Okay, so this has been On Books. Thanks for listening. I will talk to you later. Put aside some time today to do some reading. It's really good for your soul. Do some reading. Read 10 pages of something today. Make you feel good. All right. Peace.